"Stop the ceremony!" Gasps filled the chapel as Richard's voice cut through the vows. "You think I'd marry someone with nothing to her name," he sneered. The bouquet slipped in Amara's trembling hands. Whispers hissed across the room. Left at the altar, humiliated in front of everyone. And then, with a smirk, Richard pulled another woman close. "This is the woman I truly deserve." The sting was unbearable, the betrayal unfolding like a public spectacle. But what Richard didn't know was that this cruel display would uncover a secret worth billions. This is the bride left for a mistress who became an heiress. Welcome story, lovers. From where are you watching? Hit the like button and drop your city name in the comments so we can see how far our story travels. Amara Williams had grown up with grace, strength, and quiet dignity, even when the world tried to remind her of her skin color at every turn. To most, she was just another young black woman working tirelessly in the city, balancing her life between modest routines and the dazzling promises whispered by the man she loved. That man was Richard Hale, a wealthy, charming heir whose name commanded attention in social circles. To Amara, he wasn't just a billionaire groomed to be. He was the man who had once promised her forever under the soft glow of evening lights. Their wedding day was painted as a fairy tale. The chapel shimmered with ivory roses and golden chandeliers, the kind of elegance one read about in glossy magazines. Guests arrived dressed in their finest, photographers lined the halls, and the whispers carried stories of a union that would merge wealth, prestige, and romance. Amara's heart beat with hope, even as unease flickered quietly beneath her gown. Because, behind the polished smiles and carefully chosen vows, there were shadows Amara had sensed, but never confronted. Richard's family had always looked at her with narrowed eyes, their words laced with subtle disdain. They asked questions not about her dreams or her spirit, but about what she could offer to a family as powerful as theirs. And though Richard brushed those concerns aside with honeyed reassurances, Amara could not ignore how often his gaze lingered elsewhere, how frequently his phone lit up in the late hours. Yet still, she believed. She believed that love was more substantial than prejudice, that devotion could silence doubt. She walked toward that altar in a gown her late father would have adored, carrying his memory in her heart like an anchor of strength. The air was thick with expectation, but beneath the music and applause, there was an almost imperceptible crackle of tension, like thunder waiting to split the sky. What Amara didn't know was that this day, meant to crown her happiness, would unravel into humiliation, betrayal, and an explosive truth that not even Richard's billions could bury. The moment Amara stepped into the chapel, all eyes turned. The murmur of admiration rippled through the guests, yet she could feel the hidden currents of judgment beneath it. Some admired her radiance, others whispered questions about whether she truly belonged in such a place of privilege. But Amara held her head high, clutching her bouquet, telling herself that love had already conquered those doubts. As she walked down the aisle, she searched for Richard's eyes. He was handsome in his tailored suit, the perfect picture of a groom in waiting. Yet something was unsettling about the way he shifted his weight, his jaw tense as though holding back impatience rather than anticipation. Amara dismissed it, convincing herself it was just a case of nerves. The priest began his words, weaving together tradition and blessing. For a moment, Amara allowed herself to believe she was standing at the threshold of her happily ever after. But then, just as her heart opened fully to the moment, the disruption began. A commotion stirred at the back of the room. Heels clicked against the marble floor as a woman walked boldly into the chapel. Tall, fair-skinned, draped in a crimson dress that shimmered with arrogance, she carried herself like she owned the world. Gasps broke through the room as she made her way forward, uninvited yet unashamed. Amara's breath caught. She had seen this woman before. Whispers, rumors, fleeting shadows. Richard's assistant. The woman stopped at the front, her smirk slicing through the sanctity of the ceremony. And then, before Amara could understand what was happening, Richard turned. He reached out his hand, not for Amara, but for the intruder. The collective shock of the crowd was deafening. "Everyone deserves to know," Richard declared, his voice carrying both arrogance and cruelty. "I cannot marry a woman who brings nothing to this union. I've found someone more fitting." His words didn't tremble, they stabbed. He made no effort to soften the blow, no hesitation to humiliate Amara in front of everyone she knew. Laughter flickered from a corner where his family sat. Their disdain was no longer hidden. It was celebrated. Guests exchanged uneasy glances, some lowering their eyes in shame at witnessing the betrayal, while others reveled in the scandal. Amara felt her knees weaken. The humiliation was unbearable, yet she stood frozen, clutching her bouquet like a shield against the venom of the moment. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but her voice was locked inside her chest. All she could do was watch as Richard flaunted his mistress, whispering words of affection meant for the bride only moments ago. The ceremony dissolved into chaos. Some guests rose in protest, others walked out, unwilling to be part of the cruelty. But the whispers grew louder, feeding on Amara's pain. She was never good enough. What did she expect? A billionaire doesn't marry for love. Still, beneath the storm of humiliation, a seed of strength stirred in her. Her late father's voice echoed in memory. Truth always finds its way. Never bow to those who strip your dignity. She straightened, her spine, even as tears threatened to betray her composure. She didn't know it yet, but the cruel theater Richard had staged would soon collapse under its own weight. Because the mistress he paraded so proudly carried secrets darker than anyone in that chapel imagined. And Amara, mocked, abandoned, humiliated, was about to become far more potent than the billionaire who discarded her. The betrayal was complete. The stage was set, and the storm had only begun to break. The silence in the chapel was shattered when a stern voice cut through the whispers. A lawyer stepped forward, clutching a leather briefcase, his expression sharp with authority. All eyes turned as he announced he had urgent documents regarding the Williams estate, the very empire once built by Amara's late father. Gasps echoed as the words unfolded. The so-called mistress, paraded by Richard as his prize, had been caught siphoning funds, forging signatures, and disguising herself as a business partner to steal millions. The evidence was damning. Bank transfers, legal testimonies, and the final will that named Amara as the sole heiress to her father's billion-dollar legacy. The mistress's face drained of color. She tried to protest, but two security officials stepped forward, dragging her toward the doors as cameras flashed and guests erupted in shock. Richard's arrogant smirk faltered, collapsing into a mask of horror. The man who mocked Amara for having nothing was now exposed as the fool who abandoned the rightful heiress for a thief. Amara stood tall, her tears replaced by a fire of vindication. In that single moment, the humiliation transformed into triumph. Every eye that once pitied her now stared with awe. Richard's family, who had sneered at her presence, bowed their heads in shame. The chapel no longer felt like a prison of humiliation. It had become a courtroom of truth. And standing in its center, Amara wasn't just the bride left behind. She was the woman who reclaimed her power before the world. Dear audience, where are you watching from? Drop your city name in the comments. When the mistress was escorted out and Richard stood frozen in disgrace, the chapel transformed. What began as a stage for Amara's humiliation became the very platform where her power was revealed. No longer the abandoned bride, she stood as the rightful heir, The woman her late father had trusted to carry his legacy forward. The whispers that once mocked her shifted into awe, as if the room itself bowed to the weight of truth. Amara didn't speak immediately. She didn't need to. Her silence carried more authority than Richard's billions ever had. The lawyer confirmed that every share, every property, every investment now belonged solely to her. The same family who had dismissed her as unworthy realized they were now powerless in the empire they once claimed as their own. Richard tried to reach for her, his words stumbling between apology and desperation, but Amara's gaze was cold, unshaken. She no longer needed validation from a man who saw her worth only when tied to money. She turned away, not out of bitterness, but out of strength. For Amara, this wasn't just personal vindication. It was a lesson carved into history that dignity cannot be stolen and that no amount of prejudice can bury the truth forever. Her story is more than betrayal and wealth. It is a reminder to every soul who has been doubted, judged, or cast. Aside, power comes not from those who mock, but from those who rise. So tell me, dear viewers, how many more must endure before the world finally learns? Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more powerful stories and proper lessons of life.